Currently, college tuition is about $30,000 a year. If it goes up 5% a year, how much will it cost in 4 years, 10 years, t years? What I want to do on this one is I want to look at where the formula comes from. So let's assume we're just going to start right now. We're going to say t years and then the cost. Right now it's 30,000 in a year. How much will it be? Well, it's going to be 30,000 plus 5% of that, so 30,000 times 0.05. Note I can take that and factor out the 30,000, so I get 30,000 times 1 plus 0.05, or in other words, 30,000 times 1.05. Let's take a look at how much would I have in the second year. Well, it's going to go up 5% from what I had in the previous year. So if I call this thing A, then this is going to be that amount, A, plus 5% of it. Similarly, I can factor out the A, and I'll get 1 plus 0.05, or 1.05. What is my A? A is 30,000 times 1.05, and I'm going to multiply that by another 1.05. So I get 30,000 times 1.05 squared. Let's try the next year. The third year here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at it again. But this time, how about I'll call this value B. Call that one B so you can see it there. We have B plus B times 0, because again, we're going up 5% of whatever that previous year is. So we're going to have B times 1.05. And if I skip this step, it's going to be 30,000 times 1.05 squared times one more 1.05. So we'll have 30,000 times 1.05 to the third power. Do you see the pattern here? For the fourth year, and that's what I'm asked for, this is going to be 30,000 times 1.05 to the fourth power. The 10th year will be 30,000 times 1.05 to the 10th. And the tth year would be 30,000 times 1.05 to the t. Now my focus on this is really to make sure we understand this, where these numbers are coming from. We can type these in on our calculators as well. And you get that this first one is 36465.19. Now this 0.19 is probably a little bit too accurate. So it'd probably be best to say that this is 36465. Just round it to the nearest whole number in this case. And that's probably even too exact, because this is probably an estimation anyways, but it's possible. I'm not quite getting into sig figs here. And it'd be 48,867, approximately. Now, if we're taking a quiz or test, I'll tell you exactly what to do for that. And then we have our expression for 30,000, 1.05 to the t, and that's it for that one. The next one, a car loses about 10% of its value. Let me zoom in a little bit there. Every year, if it costs $15,000 now, how much will it be worth in 5 years, 10 years, t years? Well, we're starting off with that similar type of thing. We have 15,000, but this time we're losing 10%. So we're going to lose 15,000 times 10%, which would be 0.10. Make it 0.10 to make it clear. So that's going to be the same as 15,000 times 1 minus 0.1. You don't need the 0, but I'll add it in just to make it clear. Or in other words, 15,000 times 0.9. So that's what it would be after 1 year. What will it be after 5 years? Well, it's going to be very similar to what we just did in the previous problem. In 5 years, we'll have 15,000 times 0.9 to the 5. In 10 years, we'll have 15,000 times 0.9, should put 0.9 to the 10. Now let's type these in on the calculator. I'm doing that right here. So we have that after 5 years, this is going to be worth approximately $8,857. And after 10 years, it's going to be about $5,230. And what will it be after t years? 15,000 times 0.9 to the t. In general, how do you get that multiplication factor? And what do I mean by multiplication factor? In the previous problem, our multiplication factor was 0.9. In the problem number 10, it was 1.05. How do we get those? Well, and then where does the 15,000 come from? We have our starting amount. And then what are we doing? When we looked here, it was 1 minus the 0.10, and up here was 1 plus 0.05. What does the 1 mean? Because we're going to have that same thing. It's going to be 1 plus or minus. It's going to be plus if we're increasing and minus if we're decreasing what our rate is, and the rate as a decimal. What does the 1 mean, though? The 1 means 100% of the original amount. And then this thing will be raised to the t. Compared to straight line depreciation, so number 11, what that means is it's going to be 10% of the original value every year. So we'd have 10% of 15,000 will give us 1,500. So our equation in this one would be 15,000 minus 1,500 times the number of years. And this would be some function a of t. So if I was looking at this, how much would it be worth in 5 years? 15,000 minus 1,500 times 5, that would be 7,500. For both this as well as 15,000 minus it. So in other words, it's half its value. If it loses 10% a year, in 5 years it's lost 50% of its value, or half of it. And then a of 10 would end up getting 15,000 minus 15,000 times 10, which would give us 0. So in this, after 10 years, and this is what's used in accounting, they will have a fixed amount and they just write that off every year as opposed to a percentage. Let's take a look at how we do this problem. This is a pretty hard problem at this stage in the game for us. The first thing we have is 2 to the x plus 8 times. We got to realize that 2 to the negative x is 1 over 2 to the x equals 9. Just like when we were in chapter 1, when we had x's in the denominator, we don't want to have that. We want to get rid of this by multiplying every single thing by 2 to the x. So if I multiply both the left side and the right side, this will be 2 to the x times 2 to the x, or 2 to the x squared, plus 8, because when I multiply 1 over 2 to the x times 2 to the x, they reduce out, equals 9 times 2 to the x. Let's move this over to the other side. Does this look familiar to you? We had many problems that we're dealing with this idea. What's the idea here? Do you notice that it's something squared minus 9 times that something plus 8? This is a quadratic form. And the way we did it then is we said let a equals 2 to the x, and that way we could see it a little clearer. So we'd have a squared minus 9a plus 8 equals 0. This we can now factor to a minus 1 times a minus 8 equals 0. And let me just move over here. So we get a equals 1 or a equals 8. Now what is a? A is 2 to the x. So here's kind of a precursor of things to come. If we have 2 to the x equals 1, 2 to what power is going to make it 1? That power will be 0. 2 to the x, 2 to what power equals 8? Well, what is 8 as a power of 2? It's 2 cubed. And so here we would get x equals 3. And with that, we are done.